I'm from Brazil, and I do to read a bit. I'm Mariana Antum, mother, activist, feminist, journalist, and researcher. My field is comms and culture with a focus on technology and gender. So in fact, I research like apps for controlling pregnancy and menstrual cycle. I'm part of Media Lab. It's an experimental and transdisciplinary research lab at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, dedicated to investigating intersections between technopolitics, subjectivities, and visibilities. I was wondering about what to say here, and I know that I have a lot of amazing women with me in this room, so I choose to bring here the discussion about motherhood and work of care, because I think it was the point I brought in the working group too, and it's very values to me. As Bell Hooks said, and I will quote her here, sorry, although early feminists demanded respect and enlargement for housework and child care, they did not attribute enough significance and value to female parenting, to motherhood. Early feminists' attacks on motherhood alienated masses of women from the movement, especially poor or non-white women, who find parenting one of the few interpersonal relationships where they are affirmed and appreciated. I believe there is no way to talk about the future if we don't have feminism as a frame of thought. There's no digital justice without feminist thought, and not any feminism thought, but a thought that comes from Black women, from the peripheries of the global South, from indigenous and Quilombola women, women who resist daily in their territories, a feminism from gender, race, class, and territory perspective. CSW defends not let any woman or girl behind to make it impossible without intersectional feminism. I would like to invite you to look at me and realize that being here speaking to this audience is a matter of privilege, despite the fact I'm a woman from the global South. I'm a white, middle-class, cisgender woman with a college degree, a graduated degree, a visa to enter in the United States, and someone to support me with my daughter, who's in Brazil. Brazil is one of the most unequal countries in the world. This inequality affects all aspects of life, from purchasing power to access to education. Digital life is not an exception. I come from the blackest country in the world, look at me, outside the African continent. Coming from the same country where 570 children from Yanomami indigenous land died of preventable disease in the last 4 years. Children as 5 years old. Country where half of women report ever having experienced gender-based violence. It was research from this week. Country where a woman dies every day as victim of femicide. It's also new data from this week. A country where 5 million children don't have the name of the male parent, the father, on their birth document. We used to call this male abortion, and it's completely legal in Brazil. Women tie knots in water to survive and take care of their children. How to promote digital justice without seeing this kind of issue? Feminism, and all its controversial, are needed in order to build digital justice. Let me give another example, and I will try not to read here to finish with the question. My daughter goes to a public school in Brazil. In Brazil, public schools are not the best ones. The middle class used to go to the private school. So a middle class family has a family in a public school. It's a mix of the crisis situation with kind of political position. And during the pandemic, they tried to give the kids like class, homeschooling, this kind of virtual class. And okay, At my house, we have computer, mobile phone, good internet, but some of the classmates of my daughter, they don't have any internet data package, or there is only one mobile phone for a family of 3 kids and a mother that needs to work at home and take care of the kids without any kind of help. So if we want to discuss digital justice, we really need to have this kind of perspective, and waiting for the, white patriarchal, liberal, think about those kind of things. It's not a solution. We need to build solution together. And I don't have all the answers, I don't have any of them, but I think we need to think together, and a manifest or a document built by a feminist perspective could help us on that.
Thank you, Mary, for reminding us that the digital divide is actually a development divide, and we cannot be addressing that without addressing the uneven geographies of development and neo-colonialism in the digital economy. I will now request Urvashi, my colleague, to share her thoughts.
Thanks, Nandini, and thanks to both the speakers who've come before me, who've shared their thoughts. I'm in complete agreement with what you just shared. I'm Urvashi Friends, and I come from India. I work with an organization called Breakthrough. Breakthrough is an organization with a mission to make violence and discrimination against women and girls unacceptable. We work in both online and offline spaces with a community presence where we're working with almost 500,000 adolescents and looking to scale up our intervention in schools across 2 states in India. India is a huge country, so I will not state how many millions, but yeah, that's where we come from. I think the starting point of where I would want to begin is I recently saw a Netflix film on social media, and it was saying that we are the products, right, for social media companies, and which is why we get so many things free. And if that is the scenario, if we are the products, then basically it means that we really do not have the power in our hands. Somebody else is deciding what will happen to us and what happens to our data. If that is the scenario, it's a very scary scenario to be in. We are already seeing the repercussions of some of these play out in our daily lives. And I think that's the space where Breakthrough actually came in. For us, the inequities are glaring in the digital space. We have seen violence increase during the pandemic time. It was not just in homes, but also in the digital spaces. We have seen how polarized the digital space has become. Who has the access? Who is creating these platforms and for whom? So ultimately, if this is being managed by a few key people, then definitely it means that a lot of us who are on the margins will be left behind. And we don't want that to happen. And if we want to change that scenario, we have to start engaging in the feminist, with these feminist principles into how we creating the digital space and the technology for ourselves, so that those marginalizations do not have the impact on the future generations. Really, for this moment, we have to look how do we create the digital space as more equitable, where we are able to build communities, build solidarity. And we saw a sample of it, honestly, during COVID times, when people were running here and there to find oxygen, to find beds, to find hospitals, to get medicines. There was an outpour. There was an outpour of support from random strangers who would come forward and give numbers and give that information to critical patients, and that had a life-saving effect. So clearly there is a potential, but that potential needs to be built on, and that is what we are wanting to find in this conversation when we look at creating this space. The other thing is there's a lot of conversations around AI technology. Yeah? If we don't build an intersectional approach, if we don't look at ensuring that when AI is being developed, people these AI demos that happen, they happen with a certain kind of demographics kept in mind. It is men, it is mostly men, maybe mostly from the global north. So how do other gender identities get incorporated? How do their concerns are kept in mind when you are developing a technology like that? Are their concerns not important for you? Is it unequitable when you would roll it out and then certain sections are not able to use it? Does it not matter to you? This is a moment to capture this conversation and move it forward. So at this point in time, for me, I think it is beneficial not just for us, but I think if we are wanting to inform it, because this is still a new conversation, so if we do it right now, influence the policy space right now, hopefully our struggles will be much lesser, hopefully, much lesser in the future. But this is our moment for us to do that. So I'll hand it back to you, Nandini.
Thank you, Urvashi, for raising the critical issue of feminist techno-design and how we need to be thinking about alternative imaginaries of platform architectures where we are not the product. And now I welcome Sajini from research and invite her to share.
Thank you, Nandini. Hello, everyone. I'm Sachini. I'm a queer feminist activist from Sri Lanka, and I'm also a member of Realizing Sexual and Reproductive Justice. We are a Global South feminist collective. And thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this group initially, and then also to be here at the launch. And I think I will enter this, why this declaration from the point of view of our bodies. Because I think for the longest time, the internet has tried to convince us that it's a disembodied environment, that it's isolated from our realities, that it exists in a vacuum. And I think more and more we learn and we experience that this is not the case, and that we really need to talk about how, let's say, how violence that happens online or is facilitated through technology, but also decisions taken through algorithms, all of these have a direct impact on our bodies. And I think this is a point of view that feminist movements have been raising for years. We have seen this in the feminist principles of the internet and various other interventions by feminists. And I think what is really key right now is to connect that embodiment with the neoliberal logic of the internet. Because I think at the end of the day, I will take what Urvashi said, that we are all products, but we are also all workers of big tech, right? Like, we are constantly working for these platforms by putting everything out there. Our movements are in these platforms, so we are also those workers. And so we really need to start talking about that nexus between that neoliberal logic and how these companies make money, and how that takes a toll on our bodies, and how to really make those linkages with each other. And I think for this, what we need is more cross-movement organizing, like be in the sexual and reproductive rights movements or the bodily autonomy movements. We can't be talking about this on our own. We need to be talking to the economic justice groups. Earlier there was a session by the tax justice groups. We need to be talking to them, the workers' rights groups. So, like, we need to come together. And I think this declaration is possibly an invitation and an entry point into really starting that kind of cross-movement organizing and advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for pointing out the important point of continuing the conversation so that the declaration just becomes a starting point of many other conversations we need to have. And I also wanted to say that when you check out the website, there's also an email ID where if you're interested in talking about the declaration in your communities, John and ITfC Change teams are happy to support you. And you can also then contact us if you want to do any type of conversation or any further discussion on this issue. So before we go into the next part of the event, I'm just going to let you all have the last word. But in one line, and one line only, please complete the sentence, feminist digital justice means dash to me.
I'll take it. I'm trying. So, it means an opportunity for me to create a world where I can own this space.
I think feminist digital justice means to me building this from the ground up, because I think a declaration can give a framework, but it really won't make a lot of sense unless it connects to our realities and the work we are doing. So it is, I think, an opportunity to build traction and build from the bottom up.
Feminist digital justice means to be a reimagining of the world of work that's built on equity and gender equity, and a complete transformation of the way that we work.
I'm trying to stay in the same line. So, feminist digital justice to me is don't let the mothers outside the room because the babies are crying. So.
Thank you all once again. And now we are moving to the next segment of our event. And I would like to welcome Rosa Lizade, co-chair of the NGO CSW67 Forum's NGO Committee on the Studies of Women. Sonia George from the Global Digital Inclusion Partnership, Ritse Erumi from the Ford Foundation, Kari Ping from Dawn, and Rosa Babnali from Public Services International to join us on the stage. And my colleague Flora will tell you what this segment is about.
Namaste. Hay un corner acá de resistencia de traducción al español, así que las compañeras que quieran venirse para este lado, que traten ahí de seguir el hilo. Acá hay un sí, el grupo feminista en español. Okay. We try to speak loudly because yeah, vamos arriba. Okay, the idea in this part is have another provocations and then try to have a dialogue here with all of you, thinking about the declaration and the different dimensions that we are talking in the first part. In your view, I have two questions. The first one is, what are the short-term and long-term priorities for multi-scale policy and programming directions and civil society alliances building on the different elements of the declaration? And the other question is, how can we together further the gender equality agenda? We start with Rosa Lizade in the corner.
Gracias. Thank you. Lo siento, voy a hablar en inglés porque preparé mis notas en inglés, no sabiendo que no había traducción. Hello, thank you so much for having me here. I'm also the Global Director of the Feminist Task Force and co-convener of the Women's Working Group on FFP, Financing for Development. So it's from there that I come here. But I also really like the previous introductions, how people presented themselves. So I'll say I'm the daughter of immigrants to this country. I'm a Chicana, a political term for being Mexican American. I'm also a mother and a lesbian, and I'm an activist around women's economic justice. So the first question, and let me apologize ahead of time. I have an event, my event, at 6:15 around migrant women on the move. So I will have to be on the move before this session ends, unfortunately. But hopefully, I'll try to stay on as long as I could before I make the hike over there to the church center. So in terms of your first question, I think as Nandini and Urvashi mentioned how we have to look at this strategically, and we have to plan for to really put this in action. And I think we're in a really good place with this CSW prioritizing technological change and innovation, digitalization of our worlds, and digital education. It's the first time this thing has come up at the CSW, and hopefully not the last, certainly not within the UN. Because if we're gonna multi-scale and look at some of the relations of power across time and space within the UN, we can really strategize on how to take this forward. One of the things that we, as the NGO CSW, want to do is not just keep the conversations and the theme of the CSW within the 2 weeks, but be able to really diffuse the rest of the UN agenda with the outcomes of the CSW. And I think that from what I've heard of from the chair of the Bureau of the CSW, that we're gonna have some opportunities. So just looking strategically and politically at this, let me just mention a couple of ways which I think we can begin that strategizing forward and seeing where we can interplay the feminist digital justice agenda. Well, first of all, in the CSW here, as one within what we're doing the next 2 weeks, the negotiations of the CSW will impact other agendas further along. And so really pushing and fighting and advocating for a strong agreed conclusions is very important, because we're kind of like at ground zero, and that's kind of a good place to be sometimes, because we can push through things that haven't been really blocked before, if you know what I mean. Like try to make some gains where much of it has not been sort of closed off or mapped off. So I think that that's a first. I think also during this time, while colleagues of ours are in Doha for the Least Developed Conference number 5, that is a place also where some of this can be advanced, particularly quite strongly with regards to women in technology in the LDCs and in the developing South. That's a part of the agenda that's happening right now. So what comes out of Doha will be thinking of in terms of decolonializing technology and the internet, in terms of technological advances. We really have to ensure that young people and girls are involved in this as a digital society. And some of these spaces begin to exclude those who are marginalized due to their gender or race or sexual orientation or gender identity or expression or origin, or place of residence or migratory status or circumstances, and of course disabilities, those who don't have equal access to technology, from design to consumption. The other place where we hope that the CSW outcomes will enter into is the Science and Technology Forum in May. And those briefings and consultations are happening already. The chair of the CSW, Ambassador Amatu Joyini from South Africa, is also overseeing that process. So in terms of, political dynamics, we know that we have her support because she wants this aspect, the agreed conclusions to come out very strongly in order to enter into the STI forum in May. And then, of course, we look towards July and the high-level political forum that in Champia, which will also feed into the SDG summit in September. I mean, I'm very focused here on the UN and the work we're doing here. So I'm putting this out. But there's also the longer process that we look at in terms of these agreed conclusions to do a thorough job and be able to put them through the forum, the SDG review, and then further into the Global Digital Compact, which is also in process now, and feeds into the Summit of the Future that will have a review this year and then will happen next year as well. So in that sense, the CSW and this declaration is very important. I mean, that can be submitted right now to the STIs and to the consultations. It could be sent directly to the member states, to the ambassadors, and where we have allies, and ensuring that we can push through issues of digital inclusion and connectivity, internet governance, data protection, privatization of the internet. I mean, these are all issues that are very specifically going to be discussed in the upcoming calendar. So I thank you very much. You can count on us, the Women's Working Group on Financing for Development, and the Feminist Task Force, and of course the CSW as partners. And certainly looking at next year, coming full circle next year, and the theme of the CSW, which is going to focus on poverty and issues of financing. So that's an area where we can continue this vigilance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosa. And now I give the floor to Sonia. Obrigada, Sonia.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. All right. So, first of all, thank you, Dini and the whole team for inviting us to be here. It's really an honor to be in this group. Okay, can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay. This is a really important moment, I think, for all of congratulations on accomplishing it, getting to it. It's really incredible. But this is just the beginning. And so what I want to note today here with all of you are a couple of things. First, I wish there were more of us here in this room that we could influence. I'm really glad that Rosa is here. Rosa, high expectations on you to carry a lot of the messages and the findings, the declaration itself, but also others. I really think we have a huge responsibility here as civil society organizations. Civil society organizations that work in different spaces, different regions, that represent different views, to bring forth something like this declaration, not just here in this session, but really carry it throughout the next 2 weeks, to this week and next week. I think it's really powerful. It's really important, the messages that you've included, and I would hate to get to the end of next week and not having heard about it in every single session, every single moment. So I wanted to first start by challenging each of you present here, those few of us in these massive numbers of hundreds of people here at CSW, to choose one part of this declaration and carry with you every day. In whoever you talk to, however you advocate, do your part. Otherwise, we're not going to get there, because it's a very difficult process, and I think it's really important for us to recognize. Then I wanted to also note that with something this powerful, and I really think you will have to congratulate the work that was done. It is a powerful document. I think we really have to be intentional as to how we're going to coordinate and influence our own countries, our own regions, our peers, those who are in all the different spaces that CSW is intending to influence, to do something, because otherwise we are just as accomplice as those of us and many others that have not done enough to progress inclusion, equality, equity. And we're just as accomplice if we just drop it and leave it as a nice declaration. So I'm insisting on these because I've been doing these, Rosa, you are a little older like me as well, maybe some others here have many more white hairs than many of you here in the room. We've been at this fight for years and decades. On digital inclusion specifically, I've been at it for over 30 years. And as I said earlier in another session, we hardly moved the needle. Hardly. In fact, in the last few years, we've regressed tremendously. We've regressed in so many dimensions of what we consider digital development and digital inclusion that is a worry. So this is a moment that those of us who are interested in digital equality, digital inclusion, respect of human rights in the digital age, we need to really take the momentum and demand, call for action, ask our representatives wherever we are in the world, take it with us, take this declaration and use it as the voice of different women from the global majority countries. And this is really important. If we don't do this in a coordinated way, and I don't mean to be pessimistic here, I feel that it will be just yet another really nice effort with a very long process of trying to see impact. I don't want to see that. I think if each of us here takes a little bit today, maybe we can then achieve what you intended when the working group of these incredible thought leaders brought together and convened us here today. So I think we have that responsibility. The other thing I wanted to mention is that part of this momentum is not just having CSW focusing on all issues, technology, innovation, inclusion, equity, the digital age, but there's also many things that Rosa also mentioned, the Global Digital Compact, and a couple of other things that are happening in the kind of international spaces around digital development. This is yet another opportunity to bring this to the table. If the Global Digital Compact is a document that is not going to have the same kind of thinking, reflections that you've already included in this declaration, that would be, in my view, a complete disaster, a complete failure of our efforts. in terms of gender-based violence in online spaces, in terms of inclusion, in terms of connectivity, affordability, in terms of voice, civic engagement, civic participation, all of the multifaceted ways that we as citizens of the world can participate in a society. And I think that if we don't take that opportunity in this moment to change that, again, and not to be pessimistic, but I think that we are part of the process. We are part of the problem. As myself and my colleagues who are here, as we always say, is that we are then become accomplice to this exclusion, to this process that is increasing the exclusion and inequality of different groups, different women, different marginalized communities, and we don't want to be part of that. So what I want to say is that embrace it. If there's something you don't understand or you don't agree, then don't focus on it. Focus on something that you agree, that you can take with you and fight for it. Make a difference. Don't just keep it with a possibility of talking. I'm fortunate that Nandini invited me to be here, and I'm hoping that I'll be as fortunate in many other circumstances, but that you also will be, so you can carry the messages of these declarations. I think it's quite powerful, it's beautiful, and if you do have that kind of embrace from this community and others that we, each of us, can connect with, then we can make an impact. And so I would just finish by saying that we, in the organization that I co-lead with my colleague Monica Norpato, who is here in the room, and hopefully she will also talk about some of the other areas that we are working, we are committed to not only carrying it with us, partnering with you to fight for what you are demanding, but most importantly, putting into action and supporting our partners, country governments that we work with, to implement demonstrations of what the future that we want to imagine could look like if we were to put the principles of this declaration in practice. So I hope that will be the case, so that, as your colleague mentioned, as a mother, so that my 3 daughters can be incredible women in the world, and I can be proud of the world that I've helped create for them as what I like to call digital citizens. So thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you. And I will invite Lindsay. Do you have a mic? Yes. Thank you, Lindsay.
So I'd like to start off by thanking Can you hear me? Okay. I would like to start off by thanking IT for Change and the DOM team in this accomplishment, bringing together a robust group of people to really think through what and imagine what our future could look like. I'm also grateful to be here with my colleagues today. It is often the case that statements like this can be devoid of a view of the economic implications and antecedents that have structured a problematic status quo. And so I was elated when I first saw this, and so that you centered the focus on what the digital economy could look like. Because when we think about the fight for our civil rights and our human rights, if we're not thinking about the questions of our economic rights, then in some ways, we lose part of the battle. So I wanted to just thank you for that. Now, I'm in agreement with many of the tactical and strategic ways that have been laid out by my panelists. What I'd like to do here today, in the few minutes that I have, is to think more about civil society. And that was a key part of the question about what does civil society align with building look like. And what I would say, that as we think and as we collectively think through how you implement this agenda, there are 3 areas that we should think about building. The first is around building spaces. And this is a question of spaces that allow people to strategize. The reason why I focus on civil society is because we want to ensure that people who have lived experiences with structural forms of marginalization. In this case, we think about gender, but we know that these things are intersectional. So it's gender, but it's also caste, it's ethnicity, it's race, it's geography, it's ability. We want to ensure that the people who have faced these kinds of forms of marginalization because of a variety of things that have created the histories and structures that undergird our world, that they are at the forefront of driving the change that we are seeking today. And so when we think about what a feminist, a just feminist future could look like, we want to ensure that we're creating the spaces where those women, for the people who have faced these forms of marginalization, are on the forefront, strategizing together, figuring out what needs to be done in the short term, but with a view for what the long-term game should look like. The second thing that we need to build is a question of alignment. And this is creating a space to do the issue spotting, but also the pattern recognition, pattern identification. What we know is that digital technologies often accelerate long-standing issues. And so, but what's interesting about this moment is that the forms in which it takes are in many ways emergent. A lot of the questions that we're thinking about are questions of surveillance. We're thinking about the ways, and one of the colleagues talked about the fact that we are the product. Should we be? And so how do we think about what it means to align on what the core issues are and to prioritize? Again, it's a question of strategy. What should we be fighting for, when, how? And who should we lead with that? So we need to create and build this alignment across a range of different issue areas to ensure that these voices don't get lost. And you have done that in the writing of this document. You know, this is, but as Sonia just mentioned, it's the first step. But it's an incredibly important first step. So the question now is, how do we ensure that this is implemented and do it in such a way that we actually arrive at the future that we see? And the last area is really a question of building bridges. Building a just feminist digital future will require us to do the work that we need to do, but we need to do it as allies across movements. So how are we, again, connecting this to questions of economic justice, questions of ability justice or disability justice? How are we connecting it to a whole range of issues that are key, to the issues that sit and undergird the various forms of marginalization that we have seen? So I think that's probably what I would where I would start. We need to build spaces to do this work together within civil society. We need to build alignment. Often what we have seen is that things can get noisy. And so what I love about this this declaration is that you have a clear set of demands. And so the question is, how do we get that to form? And lastly, how do we build bridges across various movements so that the questions that are raised, the vision that is placed here, is actually materialized? Thank you so much.
I'd like to invite Kai GB. It's part of the DON executive member. Thank you, GB.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. It's been 3 years since pandemic. I finally come back to CSW. I'm so excited. And however, when I look at the, in addition to the assignment, I also found That's the same games again. All these contentious issues or those debates are all the same, but this time with a digital twist. So that's the challenge that we face now today, after 3 years. So I came back with this familiarity, but also kind of strangeness feeling. Anyway, I'm very glad to have this opportunity to share some of my reflection as my young colleague and my IT for Change colleague has required, I suppose, to focus on one of the 4 aspects of the declaration. So I chose to focus on my reflection focus on the 4th and the last session of the declaration, which is a feminist paradigm for digital governance. Why the digital governance, a global governance on digital this very important issue, because it set up the overarching policy framework that finally defined or redefined the technology infrastructure, data management, financing, organization of production and reproduction and social relationship that facilitated by the digital technology, etc. So in another word, without this, other 3 feminist digital paradigms we've envisioned would not be possible. That's why I want to talk about this topic. We're living in this digital area that digital capitalism and state surveillance has become normalized, has become an everyday reality, and we don't even think about it. Digital capitalism, which has this magic Midas touch that turns everything it touches into the profit. And on the other side, the state surveillance has appropriated technology to exclude, discipline, dehumanize the certain social groups, human bodies, and identities. How could this happen? The very simplified but somehow revealing answer is because the current policy and laws allow it to happen. That's such a simple answer. What are the problems with the current digital governance, and how could a feminist shift it? So let me begin with 2 cases. In July 2022, Chinese government fined the Didi 1.2 billion US dollars. Fine. That's a very, very pricey bill. And Didi is Chinese version of Uber, to make it simple, and is one of China's most valuable tech companies. This is not the first, big ticket that the government had issued to those tech companies. 1 year ago, before this case, Chinese government fined Alibaba, which is very famous, 2.8 billion US dollars in the landmark antitrust case. Both these cases offer a very clear message. While the internet companies' free flying days is over, now the big brother is watching you. However, this big fine, ticket is unlikely to make a substantial dent in Alibaba or other big tech companies' fortunes, because this is just to constitute a very minor, 4% or something their revenue, like really nothing. So this, secondly, the authority emphasized that the government is still supporting the digital economy, not limiting or trying to contain its development. We're still supported with our policies. So what that means, as feminists, how to understand this tandem of state and corporate and their collaboration or their tensions. First, regulators' biggest concern is the national security, especially in the case of Didi, who abused their monopoly position and to collect the data more than 50 million of drivers. Their personal information, their ID information, which usually only be collected by the government authority or public security bureau. So these regulations did not change the fundamental so-called the surveillance state apparatus. Actually, it's reinforced in these efforts to regulate in the private company. So actually the same game. Second, this new tendency of regulation that's shown from these two cases. It also reinforces this kind of mindset and emphasized on so-called development, economic growth versus people's basic human rights, privacy, and corporate accountability. So that's a more outstanding narrative than the latter what I mentioned, human rights, or this feminist declaration is concerned about. We can easily find similar narrative on the national security concerns playing in the broader global geopolitics, the context of rivalry between big political powers, and I'm not going to detail. You can turn on the TV and the Fox News and CNN, you get a lot of this narrative. But that's what I mentioned about this national level. But on the global digital policy debate, it's also problematic because it's dominated by the dogma of multi-stakeholderism, where state and corporations are placed on the equal footing in making public interest decisions about the future of the internet, as well as platform, data, and the AI technologies. They have so much, to say. They have so much bargaining power, negotiating power, because they have those technology and they have so much monopoly, in every aspect of economic, social, and politics. So that's why this is a global governance debate also very problematic. We have observed this trends have moved. The global governance discussion has been towards the multi-stakeholderism from the multilateralism. The UN was a good example. We're in this institution. But what is, how we differentiate these two? It's very different. Multilateralism is a governance process and decision-making led by the state, and multi-stakeholderism is a practice of governance that brings multiple stakeholders, including corporations, corporate platforms, business associations, donors, and academics, civil society actors together to participate in a dialogue, decision-making, and implementation of responses. So this is I would not, the two things I want to emphasize. The current multilateralism is not functioning well. That's the number one. And second, we need to build a more inclusive structure for the governance structure. So that's not a question. However, the problem of the current global governance structure of multilateralism has so much, have so many challenges, but it doesn't give a way of, this to legitimize the corporates intruding in the space, because they're not in the equal footing. As I said, in the UN Charter, they mentioned about NGO status. There's nothing. If you look at the UN Charter, there's nothing about business sector or corporate sector. So how you can, build this, and reinvent this legal ground? That's very problematic. This is, I think, the feminist digital justice declaration has, had very strong steps to refuse this kind of narrative. I think lastly, the big tech companies also become a fintech company. So they are not manipulate their status, data extraction, and they become a big financer, like Alibaba. Actually, that's because they're monopoly in the financing, services. So the big chunk of their profit is now made from the financial market and the financial services. Therefore, the feminists need a framework to understand, framework like this declaration, understand the tandem of state and corporation, their collaboration and tension to create a new space based on the mass social mobilization, like many speakers before me has already articulated. In conclusion, I really appreciate this feminist digital justice framework, which allow us to understand better the complexity and power dynamics of this new phase of capitalism era that characterized by the financialization and the digitalization. So we also, it's also helped us to strategize how we dismantle it. Here, I want to reiterate my young colleagues, Laura and Sala, in the recent criticism paper titled Towards the Construction of Feminist Digital Justice Agenda, Challenge and Proposals. I think to propose the 3 feminist action. First, knowledge building. We need to create, collaboratively the knowledge and better understanding of what's going on. Second, networking. And the third, policy advocacy, action. So I take this opportunity to invite all of you to participate in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we'd like to invite Rosa Maoni.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's still good afternoon or good evening, but okay. And thanks very much for inviting me to this very interesting meeting. I may be a little bit naive in the comments that I will make because I'm not an expert. I'm an analogic native. Because of my age, I can just be converted to the very elementary use of technologies rather than being an expert. But I would like, first of all, to commend and to thank very much the work of ITchange because they have been contributing a lot to open our view on what it is this digital transformation that is involving all of us. For this work, this declaration on the feminist digital justice, but more broadly for the work that ITchange has been doing, and I'm very proud to say that we have been able to cooperate also in addressing the issue about how workers can be active in this digital transition with the support of ITchange. I think that we need to realize, and I assume we are all on the same page on that data are the new gold, are the gold of the third millennium, the oil of the third millennium. You know, health is there, wealth is there, and then we need to understand that all the possible attacks on commodification of data is to make business. That's the fact. And we need to approach this issue being aware that it is first of all an economic, a class, and a gender fight that we need to fight. I think that there's important aspects that are addressed here. How we need to work together and to have a common vision on the use of data, the realization of a digital era where our society continue to maintain, this civic, I would say, ethical behavior that we need to ensure democracy to our societies, because what I see at stake is democracy. And this is at the very foundation of this. So I think that we need to talk explicitly about the fact that yes, there's an issue of protection of data, but there's an issue, more important issue about collective ownership of data. That's the real problem. We cannot leave data as something that can be commodified, that can be purchased on any sort of platform. To do that, we need to claim the fact that there is public duty, a public responsibility of government. And if I may say something, I think that this part is not, well, can be strengthened in the declaration, because it's not just about creating a community, creating, as we say here, I don't want to, digital state grounded in a feminist social contract, yes, indeed, but we also need to call on the responsibility of governments. Because any time that there is, and since the very beginning, because what I'm watching from my perspective is that any time that any sort of government, no matter the color of the tendency, are starting their digital transition, they make public procurement simply outsourcing the work, not taking into account how to protect not only data, but their own know-how. And this is weakening the power of the government, of the public administration, to keep its function. It's surely about protection of public services, but more importantly, it's about the protection of public functions that not always are in evident public services. Let's think, not only to the privatization of health services, but how to use health data. And this for women is crucial, is fundamental. Think, for instance, how can be used in a government that is prohibiting abortion. The fact that it is known that a woman is ending her pregnancies. Or think about how can be used information and data about security, or about the use of currency, how the fact that with cryptocurrencies, the function of the government to control the use of its currency is already at stake. So I think that these are things that cannot be avoided, even for us from a gender perspective. I think it's very important to read also this function with a feminist gender approach. There's an issue which is maybe not the most important, but as it is in the climate crisis, on the environmental issues, there's of course responsibility of the states, of the collectivities, but there's also an individual responsibilities. And I'm wondering how many times voluntarily we provide data, we provide information, without even considering that we are, giving very important informations that can be traded without our permission, I shouldn't say that, but I'm not using Facebook. I was blocked on Twitter, I don't know why. I don't use social media, and I don't allow my mobile phone to have my face recognition because I try to protect myself as much as I can. Of course, to enter the United States, I have to take my glasses out and put my fingerprint on the machine. But yes, this is something that we need to think about because it's also through our individual habits change in that situation. I think that having a right-based approach is crucial. It's crucial to build a digital democracy where the gender aspect is considered and is at the basis of a new society, new community. But this cannot happen if we are not able, if we are not able to involve people, to involve our sisters around the world. And this, I would like to allow me, I would like to invite all of us together to try to find a language that is more understandable by the big public, the broad public. We need to recognize that here we are an elite somehow, yeah? And we are used to a certain language that seems natural to us, or to many of us, but if we want to succeed in this challenge that is very high, we need to be able to translate those principles in a language that everyone can understand. And I think this is a democratic exercise that we need to do if we want to be successful in this. We are here as PSI very much committed to do that, and we are keen to continue to work together in that direction and to bring the experience of women workers within the feminist movement and to create this osmosis that is enriching all of us from different parts. And I would like to conclude on this note, inviting all of you on Friday at 12:30 to the church center, where we as PSI are going to have our own event that is on gender transformative digital New Deal, where we will continue this conversation, and I hope we will be able to have all of you contribute to our discussion.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of minutes. Maybe we open the discussion or some comments or some reflections here.
If it's possible.
Mariana, I see welcome.
Hi. I took a lot of notes and want to address a lot of things, but one thing that came to me when the other Rosa was speaking here, and how to make things happen in other forums, she said the environmental issue, and it's connected to the idea of data as oil. It's part of the discussion in my research. If I share with you what an app that tracks pregnancy can do, everybody will be kind of hysterical. But the environmental issue, sorry. The environmental issue is connected because there is no technology without infrastructure, and the infrastructure comes from somewhere. And when I mentioned the Yanomami crisis, it's because gold. It started because gold. Gold has still a role, you know. So maybe trying to act also in more transnational, I would say, forums, for example, like COP. It's also an option, because we need to be in all the discussions for on the basis, not only in the CSW discussion, you know, because if we are talking about the future is connected in other parts. I'll finish here because I can speak a lot of, but this point is very important to me.
Los Angeles, California. I am an avid hacker. I hack for good. I'll post my computer system to figure things out. Yeah, I listen to all you guys. So the thing that I'm doing, yes, okay. Right. I'm also part of the National Association of Social Workers. I'm the co-chair of the Tech Council. So I represent technology in the social space. I'm also part of the American Public Health Association, which is the oldest association in the world. And I'm part of the HIT section of tech. So I represent the helping profession and technologies. And so what I'm trying to do in alignment with you, what you guys are trying to do, is that I also teach at Cal State LA. I teach teaching department of social work. So what I see is a missing gap is actually the learning experience of technology. Because you look at the textbooks, you look at all the processes of learning technology, it doesn't include empathy, it doesn't include compassion, it doesn't include the euphemisms of the language of social work. So when you build technologies, it's a complete void that is human element, the human experience. So I wrote a syllabus. I'm proposing as a new course. And I'm meeting with other faculty of different universities to build out this platform that builds the humanities in tech, utilizing the structures of social work and embedding that within the construct of technology.
Any hand? Maybe? Any comments? No? Okay, I like to invite Nandini. We are in the yes. We have two reactions. Sonia, and then I have Yvi.
Thank you so much. So just very briefly, because I realize that we're also kind of at the top of the time, but if you could share with us your perspectives or comments taking the declaration and the work that you've been doing so far in connection perhaps with surveillance, which is also, I think, another important issue when we think about tech and gender, right? So if you could just briefly let us know what your thoughts are, the experiences you might have about it, what gender approaches can we think through to analyze that issue, would be very helpful. Thank you.
Sonia?
I'm happy to, but on the declaration, maybe you should answer, right? About the question on surveillance, because I do know you looked into that. I just wanted to answer or to comment on a couple of the things that were mentioned. So, two things. Yes, you were mentioning a couple of concerns, and who was the other person? Around social work. So, actually, a lot of the work that has been done in the digital development space, which is kind of like a very general way of calling the space that we're working, where people, all of us are part of, and folks that work on what we generally call ICT for D, digital inclusion, digital equity, digital equality, etc. There's actually a very strong focus on doing all the work from a human-centered perspective, and it comes across the different dimensions of development. Maybe we didn't have time to talk about it here today, but I just wanted to say it's a big, big effort, and there's actually some really amazing women, feminists, who are developing, including colleagues from ITfC, for Change, and others, really incredible work around refocusing digital, any kind of digital design and digital thinking from a, not just a feminist perspective, but one that is about caring for humans. So if you think about digitalization, not just think about digitalization as something that affects people as laborers or as people that have to produce for some kind of monetary compensation, but actually as human beings that need to care for themselves, that deserve rest, that deserve balance in life, and other kinds of elements. So I think there's a, let's say, a very strong, humane effort and focus on a lot of that work. It would be great to hear more from you on the other areas, but I think that's there. And actually a lot of the organizations that work on digital education, health, and other aspects of utilizing digital tools, right, for their own purposes, have put a lot of effort into that, precisely so that there's this human-centered approach to thinking about not just design, solutions, actions, including at the policy level. And so, with that, I hope you don't mind. I mean, Nandini, you can tell more about some of the work that some of your team has done. But with that, if you don't mind me putting a plug to our event tomorrow that you are also going to be speaking at. We have a session that is going to take place at 2 o'clock, from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. It's going to be at the Microsoft office at the event. I can give you the link. My colleague also, Evelyn, is over there. She can give you the details. We can share with you, but this is one of the aspects that is going to be discussed. So I can give you more, but I don't want to take too much of the time here.
I think I'll also just respond to your question about university education. So at Ford, one of the things that we do is support this public interest tech university network. And the idea there is that a lot of technologies are built, the curriculum does not really have an ethical or base at all. And so what they've been trying to do is to really think through what does it mean to think about technologies in society and to build the next generation of engineers, technologists, to be thinking about a lot of the questions that you have more broadly. So, I encourage you, it's PITUN, PIT, Public Interest Technology University Network, that you may have some resources there. And I think on the question you mentioned, I don't know, was the question about surveillance for us or more broadly? Okay. So, as part of a lot of the work that I do is really focused at the intersection of technology and labor. And I listen to our colleagues. I think there are, in some ways, two things that we need to really sort of be thinking about. One is a question about what guardrails should be allowed, should be in place, and then what we allow. So in a recent study that IT4Change developed, there's some thinking about what does it mean to develop an economic governance framework for data, right? So that's one place where we think about what are some of those guardrails that need to be in place. And a lot of that has come from a civil society, like thinking about our civic rights, our human rights. But there's also a question of, one, what kind of data economy should we allow, and what should be sort of in place there? And so I think as we think about it from those different angles, in what ways is it impinging on our basic civic and civil rights? And then in what ways is it impinging on our economic rights? And then for us who sit in this labor and tech intersection, in what ways are the extraction of data creating a space? As we have seen the closing of civic space and the ways in which surveillance is reshaping lives, what's happening on the workplace? As we see the rise of software, as we see the rise of algorithms as managers, in certain warehouses, there's time on tasks where we've begun to see increased levels of injury and health, right? We want to be thinking about what is necessary in the different spheres of our lives. And then that's where I was talking about earlier, about building alignment across the community. Because what we see in the labor space among workers is very related to core questions of democracy, right? And then across the board, we see gender and all of that. So the question here is, what does our digital rights and digital justice look like in every aspect of our lives? And how do we connect that in many ways, which what this framework does provides an umbrella, but we need to get it deeper.
I give the word to Nandini, and I agree with Rosa that we need to create different tools with the declaration in the feminist popular education way to try to share this knowledge for trade unions with social movements and other communities that need this knowledge but need to dialogue in different ways with the dimensions and problematics. Nandini?
I want to thank everyone here and all of you commented on the declaration for being with us today. I just want to say that you can check out the website, which is very simple to remember, feministdigitaljustice.net. There is a QR code to the postcards that we distributed, which links you to the site. And in addition to the declaration, you can read the background paper of the issue analysis, where we do discuss what the group thinks of the corporate states and its complex and many, many other issues like the reformed over competition. So it would be great to, it would be wonderful to receive your feedback as well on this. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah?
I only took a photo about the first panel, but I will send you
Yeah? Okay.